April 16, 1947. Hundreds of spectators lined the docks of Texas City to watch a cargo fire aboard the SS Grand Camp. In her hold, 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer are undergoing a reaction no one on that waterfront understands. At 9:12 a.m., every person watching will be caught in the deadliest industrial explosion in American history. The catastrophe was only beginning. In 1947, Texas City's docks pulsed with the pace of post-war commerce. Ships from Europe, South America, and the Gulf Coast crowded the piers, unloading machinery, chemicals, and sacks of fertilizer by the thousands. The port's lifeblood was its workers, longshoremen, firemen, and stevedores who moved cargo around the clock. Most lived just blocks from the waterfront, their daily routines shaped by the shift whistle and the steady churn of incoming vessels. The Grand Camp, a French-flagged freighter, arrived in the early hours and tied up at Pier A. Its manifest listed 2,300 tons of ammonium nitrate fertilizer packed in 1-inch thick canvas sacks. Nearby, the American ship High Flyer was also taking on fertilizer and phosphate, her hull pressed tight against the same wharf. The port logs show a rapid turnover. Ships loaded and departed within hours, cargoes stacked high to maximize each voyage. There was little room for caution. On the waterfront, oxidizers like ammonium nitrate were stored beside barrels of fuel oil, ammunition, and organic materials. No federal regulations dictated separation of hazardous chemicals from combustibles. The only guidance came from shipping manuals that emphasized speed and efficiency over risk. Fire crews drilled for oil blazes, not chemical reactions. Most workers knew ammonium nitrate as a fertilizer, and few understood its explosive potential under heat or pressure. The city's prosperity depended on this rhythm. Each shipment meant jobs and wages, but also a steady buildup of risk. In the rush to rebuild a world scarred by war, safety codes lagged behind the demands of industry. On these crowded docks, danger was often invisible, hidden in the cargo holds, and overlooked in the race to keep the port running. At dawn, smoke curled from the Grand Camp's number 2 hold. By 6:15 a.m., the port alarm rang out, and fire crews rushed to the scene. The ship's French officers, pressed by the urgency, ordered the hatch sealed and steam piped into the cargo hold, a standard tactic for oil fires, but one dangerously unsuited to ammonium nitrate. Coast Guard logs confirmed the steam generators delivered 150 pounds per square inch into the hold by 6:42 a.m. The temperature inside, already climbing, began to rise even faster. Firefighters, led by Chief J. Sandberg, crowded the wharf, hoses ready but water flow hampered by damaged mains. Curious onlookers gathered along the pier, drawn by the spectacle and reassured by the presence of uniformed men. Inside the Grand Camp, the chemistry of disaster was underway. Ammonium nitrate, stable at room temperature, becomes volatile when heated in a confined space. The steam, meant to suffocate the flames, instead accelerated a thermal runaway. By 8:07 a.m., the Coast Guard recorded a loss of boiler pressure, and the fire was no longer responding to suppression. At 8:45 a.m., a telegram from city officials warned of imminent danger, but no evacuation was ordered. At 9:12 a.m., the sequence ended in a single, shattering instant. The Grand Camp vanished in a fireball. The explosion registered on seismographs as far as Galveston. Steel plates, rivets, and burning debris rained down across the city. A dock worker's voice, captured in a 1947 oral history, recalls that it was like the sky split open, and he never saw the men beside him again. In less than a second, the cost of one wrong decision became irreversible. Steel fragments, burning sacks, and debris from the Grand Camp rained across the harbor, igniting fires in warehouses, oil tanks, and on the decks of nearby ships. The force of the blast displaced thousands of cubic yards of water, generating a surge that rose over 4 feet at the tide gauge and crashed against the waterfront. Witnesses described a wall of water sweeping debris and bodies inland, flooding the first floor of City Hall and carrying shattered cargo far up Main Street. The High Flyer, moored just beyond the Grand Camp, suffered scorched decks and ruptured hatches from the initial explosion. Its cargo, ammonium nitrate and phosphate, began to smolder. Throughout the day and into the night, fire crews and volunteers struggled to cool the burning vessel, but damaged pumps and a crippled fire department left them with few options. At 1:10 a.m. on April 17th, the High Flyer detonated. The second blast sent shrapnel across the harbor, struck the tug Mackinac, and triggered a brief new surge in the tide. The explosion deepened the devastation, compounding the fires and scattering more debris over an already shattered city. Coroner lists filled page after page with names, 581 confirmed dead by official count, though the true number may never be known. The blast and fires erased entire families, leaving only fragments to be identified in makeshift morgues. Hospitals, already small by big city standards, became scenes of chaos. Surge logs from Galveston County General show nearly 4,000 injured, with more than 1,000 suffering severe burns or blast wounds. Dr. Samuel Carter, a young hospital intern at the time, later recalled, "There were so many bodies we ran out of beds before noon. We treated people on the floor, in the halls, anywhere there was space. The fire department was all but wiped out. 27 firefighters, almost the entire force, perished in the first blast, many never found." Marie Hernandez, granddaughter of one of the fallen, described the aftermath. "My grandfather left for work that morning and never came home. The station was empty. The city had no one left to answer the alarms." In the days that followed, Texas City became a city of the missing. Red Cross volunteers posted lists outside churches, while families searched for loved ones among the injured and the dead. The loss reached into every neighborhood, every block. The disaster's toll was not just in numbers, but in the sudden emptiness left behind. In the aftermath, grief gave way to a search for accountability. Survivors and families, faced with staggering loss and mounting medical bills, turned to the courts. For the first time in American history, a class action suit was filed against the federal government, arguing that the ammonium nitrate aboard the Grand Camp, and later the High Flyer, had been produced and shipped under government contract with no adequate safety oversight. The case, filed in the Eastern District of Texas, drew national attention. Legal teams pored over shipping manifests, Coast Guard investigation exhibits, and procurement documents from the War Production Board. Testimony from chemical experts and port officials filled the courtroom, as attorneys argued that the government's failure to regulate hazardous cargo had directly contributed to the disaster. The judicial journey stretched for years. Plaintiffs challenged the government's claim of sovereign immunity, citing the Federal Tort Claims Act. District court filings reference Coast Guard inquiry findings that ammonium nitrate had been stored in bulk, with no mandated separation from combustibles, and with firefighting protocols unsuited to chemical risk. The evidence painted a picture of systemic neglect, not just tragic accident. In a rare move, the case advanced to the Supreme Court, which declined to overturn the lower court's ruling. The decision set a precedent. The federal government could be held liable for negligence in handling dangerous materials. Legal historian Dr. Linda Hargrove explains, Texas City forced a reckoning. For the first time, the law translated collective grief into a demand for institutional change, a signal that safety failures would not be shielded by bureaucracy. In the wake of the Texas City disaster, the absence of federal oversight for hazardous materials became impossible to ignore. Congressional hearings in 1947 and 1948 led to the first amendments to the Federal Explosives Act, introducing mandatory distance requirements for storing ammonium nitrate and other oxidizers. The U.S. Bureau of Mines published new guidelines in 1948, calling for segregation of oxidizers from combustibles and the installation of water-based firefighting systems on ships and at storage sites. These recommendations formed the backbone of the earliest federal codes, later incorporated into the Code of Federal Regulations. Over time, regulatory responsibilities shifted to agencies like OSHA and to the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, first issued in 1989 and revised in the 1990s, specifically referenced the Texas City explosion as a case study in the dangers of poor labeling, inadequate employee training, and lax storage rules. The Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration finalized its Hazardous Materials Code in 1994, codifying strict separation and temperature control for ammonium nitrate and tracing its lineage directly to the lessons of 1947. The disaster's legacy is not confined to the past. When a fertilizer plant exploded in West Texas in 2013, federal investigators cited Texas City by name in their inquiry. The same failures, insufficient segregation, outdated codes, and a lack of emergency planning were found at the heart of both tragedies. The rules written in response to Texas City continue to shape how hazardous cargo is managed, reminding every regulator and operator that the cost of complacency is measured in lives. Industrial sites nationwide still store millions of tons of hazardous chemicals near communities. Regulatory gaps persist, and ammonium nitrate remains widely used. The line between routine and disaster is thin, and every overlooked warning carries a human cost that cannot be measured in numbers alone.